Hi, my name is Dr. Robert Priebe. I am the creator of the vlog called Parks as Icebergs. I have 30 plus years of parks practitioner experience in a wide range of functions. And I have a PhD I acquired from the University of Alberta in 2019, whose subject area was focused on parks decision making in civil society. So every time I do one of these little chats, I call them an ice sculpture. You have to bear with me. I'm a parkie, so as parkies, we have to have fun. So I try to make light. I try to have fun things to talk about. So today we're going to do a deep dive on why parks, recreation, and leisure are important to the health and well-being of the community. I'll provide a high-level summary of some specific pieces of academic research that I use my practitioner lens as a guide to curate from the academic literature. The next vlog will be focused on on budgeting. So how do you take those benefits and think about them from a budgeting perspective? So as Rachel Maddow would say, watch this site. So the articles below on the screen are basically the source material for this. I could have found another 100 literally. But what I tried to do was pull out ones that I think are the most insightful. Excuse me. So the one that kind of wraps it all up the best, you might say. There's two of them. One is by Tiziano Tempesta, an Italian researcher who wrote an article in 2012 entitled Benefits and Costs of Urban Parks, a Review. Now, she identified the costs, and that'll be discussed more in the next blog, but the benefits that she identified were in two categories: physical and biological, and social and economic. Now, various terms have been used to describe these benefits. So don't get hung up on the terms, but focus a little bit more on the individual parts of what's in each category. So in terms of the physical biological, think about an urban atmosphere with parks and without parks. So when you have green spaces around you that have trees and maybe natural areas, those spaces provide temperature moderation, provide local climatic effects. So for example, I was a runner for years in Edmonton's River Valley. On a windy day, I would go for a run in the river valley, and the wind would be going across the top of the river valley, and it wouldn't be all that windy in the river valley. So it was really quite nice. So there's trees provide levels of shade. So there's all these small microclimatic effects that help certainly critters and helps human critters. Another biological benefit of parks. When I talk about biological benefits, I'm talking about trees, grasses, soils, natural areas kind of thing. Excuse me. So what do these type of landscapes do? They remove air pollutants. So they take out volatile organic chemicals. They actually suck some of the pollutants in the air into the landscape itself, and then it gets neutralized. You get it impacts the presence of a green space will impact urban hydrology, particularly in heavy storm events. So when it's raining, as a general rule, trees and grasses and soils and whatnot will suck up some of that moisture for its own use, kind of thing. So the volume of stormwater is much less than, or is less than what it might be, kind of thing, could be. When you have these assets, if they're just a lot of hard surfaces like roads and asphalt parking lots and more buildings, all of that water gets funneled into our sewer system, which into our stormwater system, which then ultimately floods out into the rivers at much higher volumes and rates, and has a scouring effect on the rivers themselves, kind of thing. Trees and parks generally mitigate noise. So if you had trees, can be used as kind of sound barriers. They're not necessarily as effective as concrete or steel barriers to mitigate sound, but they do mitigate sound for sure. There's urban wildlife supported all in our parks. So, think of the squirrels and the coyotes and in the river valley. You think of the birds wherever, kind of thing, and the insects and whatnot that are all over the place, that all that live in our parks and river valley and natural areas. All of these things are part of a broader food chain, so they help keep our ecological system healthier. Trees in park sites in particular expand the biodiversity of the local area. So think about Dutch elm disease, which has been a significant problem for Edmonton, for the West in particular, but Edmonton in particular. We've had pretty aggressive Dutch elm disease control programs to limit the spread of those Dutch elm beetles, kind of thing. If all our trees were elm and that the Dutch elm beetles came in, it could have literally wiped out all the trees in the city. We plant a diversity of trees which attract different, which means that you're going to have greater biodiversity, which means in part that you don't get your whole tree canopy wiped out by a disease, kind of thing. It also supports broader, not just trees, but grasses and whatnot, support broader urban biodiversity generally, kind of things, support broader, plants and animals in an urban setting than would be if it was just concrete and buildings, kind of thing. A paper that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes by Peter Harnick and John Crompton actually quantified a lot of these numbers, these physical biological benefits, kind of thing, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there's been research to figure out what is the economic benefit of parks. So the second big lumping is in social and economic benefits. So benefits to individuals. The city is a much more aesthetically pleasing place. We know from research that areas that are run down, not very attractive, tend to be beat up, tend to reduce property values, and people tend to have less commitment to making their personal space, their home and yard more attractive, because the rest of the neighborhood looks like crap. But the park can act as a way to make the area look more attractive. Parks provide an emotional and spiritual experiences. So, if you think about our Edmonton's River Valley was the original home of a lot of indigenous populations before the white man came. That the River Valley has tremendous the indigenous community have a tremendous connection to the River Valley. There's a spiritual connection with that as well, and just connection to nature is often seen from a spiritual perspective as well. psychological benefits, reduce stress. You get out, you do things, you burn off, your boss told you something you didn't like. You burn off that excess energy by going for a walk in the river, going for a run, or playing hockey and hitting that guy you didn't like on that other team a little bit hard. So those are psychological benefits of parks. There's a tremendous amount of social capital development, social benefits to park. So when you get out in your park, you're meeting your neighbors. I ran into a former colleague. I met her husband. She met my wife. You're meeting people in an environment that you both enjoy, you both love, and you can have casual conversations. My wife struck up a relationship with a photographer that was visiting a stormwater management facility in our area, and we've become friends with them now, and they come and they're quite into taking pictures of hummingbirds of all things, and we have hummingbirds at a recreational property we have, and he and his partner will come out and take pictures of the hummingbirds and give us these pictures, and they're beautiful, and it all because my wife was out for a walk in a natural area and struck up a conversation. So you're building connections with people, and these people were people of a different culture. They were Vietnamese background kind of thing. They'd been in Canada for a number of years, but we were sharing discussions around food with them kind of thing when we've gotten together with them. So there tends to be where communities are where individuals and communities are socially connected to one another, there tends to be fewer incivilities. Because your neighbor, you talk to them, you don't see them as the other kind of thing. There's less crime when people are out in their community and connecting and talking to people. I've attended recreation conferences, and one of the titles of one of the sessions was Recreate or Incarcerate. And the notion there was, and this was from a police officer, the notion there was get people active and healthy and participating in activities that are positive, that get them on a track that helps them steer away from things, they're pro-social behaviors, they steer away from things that are going to do them harm in the long term kind of thing. So as a general, this Tempesta article, as a general rule, said it's possible to state that in many cases, the flow of benefits largely overcomes the management costs, so the urban parks seem to produce a net park for citizens. Now, I want to talk, now as I've said, there's been research that has actually quantified those benefits of the ecological goods and services of air pollution mitigation and stormwater management and social capital development kind of thing. So there's been research that has actually tried to quantify it, and a piece of that, and I won't go through all of the elements because they're really the same elements that was mentioned in the Tempesta article, but an article by Peter Harnick and John Crompton. They're American researchers. They crafted a journal article in 2014 in a journal called Managing Leisure. Now, as an aside, Managing Leisure is one of the A journals, so to speak, A quality level journals in leisure and recreation. So it's a very reputable journal. John Crompton himself has been to Edmonton to Alberta a number of times, been brought to it, and the reason why they bring him in to talk is, and I'll just read an excerpt from his paper that was prepared in 2014 with Peter Harnick, and the article's name was Measuring the Total Economic Value of a Park System to a Community. In it, they argue, in the political arena, One good way to make an invisible issue visible is to frame it in economic terms. Most easily understood is a return on investment metric, which often serves as a common denominator to enable trade-offs among diverse programs. So if you're competing for funds with police, fire, transit, transportation, whatnot, you need to have some sort of way of economically identifying the benefits of parks. So this does not mean that in park services should be justified by their economic contribution alone. However, if no economic measure of their value is offered, they will often be discounted or misprioritized. That's my bias. I think they are misprioritized. After all, they say, since the costs are easy to identify, the absence of estimated benefit badly skews any attempt at a calculation by elected officials and taxpayers. How often have we heard things like, well, parks are fun? Actually, we used to have a marketing slogan in the Parks Department in Edmonton in the early 90s, and it was called, "We're number one in fun." Over time, I've come to realize that was a good marketing slogan, maybe from a program perspective, but it also ingrained in in some people's thinking that parks are just about fun, where there's actually much broader benefits than just fun in a park. But that's a big piece of it too. So to give you an example of the benefits, some of the examples of what the economic benefits of parks could be, with things like, so if you have people coming in from out of town to watch an Oiler hockey game, to watch the Rolling Stones at Commonwealth Stadium, Shania Twain at Rogers Place, people will come from out of town. They will stay in hotels. They will eat in restaurants. So they're paying for a ticket to go to that all of that money is staying locally. So there's direct benefits that way. And as I said a little bit earlier, there are indirect benefits. One of them being property values. And I want to talk a little bit more depth about property values. So when parkland around park sites are often more valuable than residential land away from park sites. So sorry, let me say that again. So land around park sites is more valuable than the land away from park sites. So what Harnick and Crompton quantified was that basically there was about a 20% increase in property values on land that is directly adjacent to or back onto parks. And parks could be neighborhood parks, district parks, trails. So basically what they're saying is within 150 meters of a park site, people who bought that land, their land value is higher, which is good for individuals, right? It's also good for the municipality, and the way it's good for municipalities is because the municipalities tax them at a higher rate. So when you have land near parks, it generates more tax revenue. So there's certainly a loss of tax revenues if you had developed the park as residential, for example, instead of a park, but there is some value recaptured when it's across from a park site. And you also see this because developers like to have parks, residential backing onto park sites, because those lots, so backing on is the highest value. And then as you get further away, the positive financial benefit is less, kind of thing. I talked to the Harnick and Crompton quantifies how much stormwater costs and air pollution mitigation happens, and what the economic impact of that is. one of the, and I won't go into it, the numbers, because they're really, it's great research. You have to look at how they created them. But basically, it saves the municipality money by having a park there because they mitigate pollution and they reduce stormwater costs. One area that is not well understood or not well studied or not well known. I think it's well studied and well understood, but elected officials and some administrators aren't aware of the financial benefit of social cohesion. So one of the things that they looked at was, so what's a surrogate for social cohesion? What could be a surrogate for social cohesion? So a surrogate for social cohesion that they identified was volunteerism. So Edmonton is a massive group of a city with massive volunteer capacity. We've had, between festivals and concerts, like all kinds of triathlon events have come to Edmonton. Huge, all our running events have huge volunteer activities. Community leagues are massive in terms of have accommodate. If you think about when you want to skate in an outdoor rink in the winter in Edmonton, that's all done by volunteers. That community hall was developed through fundraising, developed from community volunteers. I've been a hockey dad, so I was a team manager, part-time coach sometimes. Sad for those kids, but nevertheless, it happened on occasion. My wife would make muffins for kids. I was a tournament organizer. I bet most of you who listen to this volunteer in their community for their kids' activities or have participated in maybe a folk music festival as a volunteer. So it's a huge, it's a good surrogate measure of how the value of social capital development. Now, in 2017, they did an analysis to figure out how much does volunteerism contribute to the GDP of the country. So in 2017, the 2.5% of the GDP of the country was due to volunteerism. Is that a big number or small number? We hear often about the oil and gas industry and their contribution to the GDP. Their oil and gas in Canada contributes 5% of the country's GDP. So volunteerism contributes 2.5% of the country's GDP. So it's not a small number. This is not a small thing. And that volunteerism is for somebody else always. So there's a social connection piece of volunteerism that makes our city healthier, wealthier, and makes a healthier citizenry. The last one I'm going to talk a little bit about is because it's a little bit of an aside, but not really. So one of the things we see in Edmonton is a lot of sports fields, and there tends to be some diminution of the value of sports fields in the city by some. And I think it's kind of a fundamental lack of understanding of the value of sport. So what we find, research has shown that you get enhanced fitness and energy levels for all those that are engaged in sport. Those benefits are not limited to just the sport activity itself. You develop cognitive skills such as in executive and planning your day kind of thing, planning your life skills. You have greater attention. You can multitask. You can develop self-esteem, self-efficacy. You can develop a locus of control. You can learn to communicate. All these things are like individuals who are participating aren't just having, they are having fun, but they're also developing life skills that they will take outside of that sport field or that hockey rink, whatever their sport activity is, kind of thing. So when they develop those life skills, it means you're reducing the impact of some risk factors. So if you're out there, I, for example, there's a history of heart trouble in my family. So when I have consciously tried to be active because I want to build up my heart, so I don't have the problems that my mother's side of the family has, and knock on wood, it's working so far. So there are lower antisocial behaviors and higher pro-social behaviors. So if you've learned to function in a team environment, you tend not to get into the silliness about, picking on people, hazing people. Hazing probably a bad example, but picking on people and just treating people with more respect, kind of thing. And in the long term, the sporting activities keeps you active, so it prevents chronic diseases, enhances mental health and wellness. If you think about I think we've never had a time in our society when we've had more stress than we've got more stress now than we ever did before. There's a lot of reasons for that, and there's a lot of ways we can combat that. I recently heard of a study in the US that said they've never experienced such high rates of 5-year-old kids coming to the emergency ward with suicidal ideation. Now think about that. And this was before COVID. So we need to be finding ways to help children, adults deal with all the stresses in their lives, kind of thing. Sport and recreation is part of the answer, not the only answer. But all of these things combined, so all of the benefits of parks, so going back to the physical and biological benefits that make our air healthier, our water healthier, our tax base healthier, all contribute to a more sustainable city. So that's really all I want to share with you today. What I want to just want to remind you, though, is with these benefits of mine of urban parks, and urban parks can include just green space, can be natural areas, can also be rec facilities that have arenas, pools, fitness centers, those kinds of things. We need to find a way to talk about them in budget processes. And my next vlog, I'll be talking about how we can think about budgeting with these benefits in mind. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to our chat next time. Thank you.